We can do that. Good morning. It's 11:34 on Thursday, December 12th, 2024, and this regular meeting of the Sandpoint Pedestrian and Bicycle Advisory Committee is now called to order in council chambers at City Hall, 1123 West Lake Street, Sandpoint, Idaho. For the record, I'm Committee Vice Chair Molly O'Reilly presiding. I cannot see and I can't read this and see who's present. Heather, would you say who's present, please?
I believe I can. See if I can remember everybody's names. So present, we should have committee members, Jennifer, right? You're Jennifer, okay. Jennifer, Julie. Do I have Julie? No, I do not have Julie. Taylor, thank you. Reed, awesome. And then we also have Kate and committee, or wait, no, skipped here. We have Kate digitally, correct?
Correct.
And digitally, we have Radley Peterson, Evan Lewis, and Aaron Billings. In addition to the committee, council liaison Deb is also in attendance, as well as staff liaison civil engineer Brandon.
I can't see Radley. Is he?
Seeing that on there? No, he's not clicked on. He was invited, so he may join us later. So we'll see if he's able to attend.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Kate. At this time, I will entertain a motion to approve the minutes from our November 14th, 2024 meeting.
So move.
Second.
Okay, is there any discussion?
I can't.
Deb
second.
can't
Somebody else
second.
can second. It's just automatic for me. Move on.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Abstain? Motion passes and the minutes are approved as presented. Old unfinished business. For our first item of business, we will vote to form our Cedar Street Subcommittee, who will then provide a report. Let's see. On that subcommittee were Aaron Billings and me. And who was with us?
Brandon, oh, Holly,
Yeah.
Evan? Oh,
Yep.
yeah.
Evan,
That's all I've got.
yeah. And yes, well, Brandon and Holly would be ex officio, I would guess, as staff members. So at this time, I will entertain a motion to form the Cedar Street Subcommittee comprised of Aaron Billings, Evan Lewis, and Molly O'Reilly. Is there a motion?
I so move.
Thanks, Kate. And a second?
Somebody should say
I'll
something.
say second.
Yeah.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
I just got that down. Good job.
Anyone opposed? The Cedar Street Subcommittee has been formally established and will now hear a report, which was actually submitted in writing. And Heather and Brandon, it would be nice to know what recommendations of the subcommittee about the design were adopted. Is it possible to add that into there here? Since everybody has the report in writing?
Nothing from that report has been adopted into the design as of yet. We're still in the middle of design.
Are we gonna talk about that report at all?
That would be great.
Um,
Erin, have you some thoughts you'd like to talk about?
Well, my one thought was there was some discussion about, you know, making the sidewalk 7 foot on one side and 5 foot on the other side. And then maybe turning it into a pathway, and then the whole concrete piece came in that you'd be able to see it more relative to driveways. But I would say if you have a concrete driveway, you're not, I mean, the concrete sidewalk, you're gonna see it or not see it. So that was kind of grayish. My other comment would be that I think it makes more sense to leave equal width sidewalks on both sides, just because you never know which side all the people are gonna be on. So it's more of an opinion. It's just a thought process. I grew up somewhere where the sidewalks were equal and put on both sides of the street. So, yeah. And I like narrow travel lanes. Shrink those babies down to, it's only wide enough to get 3 bikes to pass.
Right.
That design, you go over like it was 2 lanes for driving and then parking on both sides.
No,
It's, one lane of vehicle traffic in both directions, no parking on either side, no bike lanes. Planter strips on either side and sidewalks on both sides. And that's a little different than a typical street section because we have is that right away, Richard? If we had 60 feet through the whole thing, we have our choice between bicycle lanes or parking, in which case we would probably have put bicycle lanes there. But kind of limited, we have to have the planter strip to store snow so that it doesn't impact the sidewalk and the traffic.
so I guess my comment would be that for the most part, nobody's parking on that street. I drove down that street yesterday. No, Tuesday, to be completely accurate, not that it matters. So could we put bike lanes? We can't have a bike lane in traffic. I mean, it's residential, it's not a collector.
I'd have to look up the
I guess if we have 6-foot sidewalk, that's outside the urban core, so it would accommodate bikes. Need to be on the sidewalk, whereas adults can just manage cars or making some assumptions there, not all adults, but, most of them.
So where we're at right now with the design. If you'd like, I can add a agenda item to the next meeting. So where we're at.
Brandon, you're
Brandon?
breaking up for me.
Yeah, I can't quite hear. What were you going to add to the next meeting?
If you'd like, I can add an agenda item for myself to make a brief presentation about where we're at in the interim, in the design process. To kind of explain this better, if I had some time to prep. I don't have all of it memorized off the top of my head, so I'd have to have some time to prep in order to tell you the truth.
Aaron, do you want to talk about why we wound up recommending wider on one side than the other?
Well, Holly said that there was maybe going to be sharrows, and I didn't feel that that was a very good solution because it's going to be a lot of younger kids with the school being close to there. So that's why we said maybe we could make one wider to accommodate bikers and walkers on the sidewalk. There was never mention of bike lanes when we were in our committee walking down the street.
It's just sharrows, so I
Just
misspoke.
sharrows. Yeah.
I misspoke.
Kevin, your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I felt that trying to find a way to prioritize bike lanes on that road, given the residential nature, would be great. And I know I had to leave early before the full discussion was complete on site to talk through all of the challenge and nuances, but I thought your notes did a good job of recapping, Holly.
Thank you. Aaron's concerns about the small kids and encouraging bikes to take one side versus mix it up on both as to better accommodate the variety of people who would be using it was why we wound up with 7 feet on one side and 5 on the other. But I think having Brandon present to the whole committee would be great.
I
That's
would
my
find that
comment.
helpful.
Sorry. My comment to that, having finally become an empty nester, is that very rarely can you actually control small children and get them to go. And quite often I see children on Division riding the wrong direction in the bike lane. So I think ultimately, if you have 6 feet on either side, then you have enough room for everybody. Kids are more likely to, make way or ride into the grass if they see somebody walking that they need to avoid, as opposed to figuring out which side of the street they're gonna ride on. They're gonna ride on the most convenient side for themselves because maybe mom said, don't cross the street, it's too busy, etc. So, I don't know that you're gaining that much between the 5 on one side and the 7 on the other side. So, again, full of opinions, but, that would be my experience as how that sidewalk would actually end up getting used.
Thank you. That's good input. The other thing we had a concern about was the swept wide radius corners, which is going to encourage vehicles to go around them pretty darn fast for a neighborhood. And we don't tend to use NACDO urban standards here, and so we didn't make much progress with that. And hopefully there will be a subcommittee on intersections that can tackle that. And it may not affect this project, but we hope nobody gets taken out by cars going around corners too fast.
Ollie, those standards that you just spoke of, I'm not familiar with those.
The
Did you?
national,
Yeah, that's the urban.
the National Association of City Transportation Officials, I think, is NACTO. And I think we can find their guidelines online, even though we aren't a member city and couldn't afford it, wouldn't. They tend to be the ones that have the most advanced biking, walking, transit oriented narrower travel lanes recommendations because they are city officials. And AASHTO is more highway. And so
Okay, that's
we're kind of using a standard that I think isn't our optimum.
right. And I'm just wondering if that falls all back into the transportation piece and then the fire truck piece and blah, blah, blah. But I'll look into that and read up on some of that stuff. And, because I think we go a little bit too vehicle happy instead of paying attention to our pedestrians. So,
It also, the wider radius impacts curb ramps, their placement and their ability to point the pedestrian who's visually impaired or in a wheelchair directly where they need to go next. Okay, is there anything else on this committee report?
Can I just add, this is Brandon, we presented, the current, preliminary design to the public in a public open house at the library a few weeks ago. The only people that showed up were the neighbors, the people that live directly on Cedar. I think for projects, the city capital projects, that involve a lot of pedestrian infrastructure, it would be a good idea if this committee went to those public open houses. Both to get input on the design as citizens, but also to, help talk to people in the community and explain your emphasis on trying to implement public and, you know, pedestrian and bicycle infrastructure into designs, so. Just wanted to add that.
So I'm gonna agree with Brandon on that and say that because we spend all our time doing this and then we start to talk about urban standards, that our knowledge base is gonna be broader than the people that live on the street. And sometimes they're against something until we go in there, and explain to them the whys of why we're thinking that. And I think that if the whole point of our committees is to have that better integration with the community, that's, when we do schedule these meetings, I think we need to maybe choose a couple of people from the committee and maybe we cycle through so everybody gets their turn to, show up to those things so that we can say, well, it comes from these standards and this is why they do that. And this is where they use this everywhere else. And I think that that will help us come up with a better product. And a lot of people don't know what they want until they have it or until they don't have it. And then they're like, well, why do we have this big corner? Now the trucks come down here too fast, but people didn't see that because they're not looking at that lower, more detailed level. And if we're reviewing all that, we're going to have that information to share with them. So I think that's incredibly important to get everyone to buy into why we're doing it a certain way. So.
Is there a way that you could? Because we were talking last time about how not everyone catches on when there is an open house. I mean, granted, you did tell us. Is there a way to make like an action item on upcoming meetings where there are open houses? Does that need to come from us? Can
We could send out invitations just like we did at the meeting, couldn't we? We know there's nothing.
Yeah, I'll just make it standard moving forward. I mean, this all kind of happened while as this committee was being formed. I will try to keep in the back of my mind, like when we're sending out public notices, once we schedule a open house for a city project, that, you know, we should also send it out, not just to this committee, but all the committees that it'll affect. But I will also say that like sometimes we're just trying to get those public open houses going so we can keep moving on with the project. And we do this once a month. So you're not gonna, you know, announcing it at the meeting is not gonna give you extra heads up.
it's just an email blast, like.
If I can interject real quick, so right now we are on the unfinished business of the formation of the committees. Item number 9 on today's agenda does cover the open house notifications
Wow,
and such.
you're right.
So we will circle back to that if you'd like
Good
to.
job, keep us on track.
Haley.
Way to go.
Well done. All right, that was a good discussion. Thank you. Okay, we'll now discuss and form our multimodal transportation master plan subcommittee. Brandon, would you just quickly review what we think this subcommittee should, what you as staff thinks it ought to do, and when you think there will be things it should be dealing with?
So we typically update our plan like this every 5 years or so. The last time, our last version of our multimodal transportation master plan is 2021, I believe. So we're getting close to the point at which we're going to start ramping up to hire a consultant to prepare an updated version. In short, what it is it kind of lays out obviously our plan routes for you know, our priority pedestrian network. You know, if we want to update that or add something or take something off, there will be an updated pedestrian priority network. There will also be a bicycle network. I believe it also includes the truck route network. So there's maps like that. The other big part of it is identifying capital projects for the city that we're going to do in the next 5 to 10 years. That's the big part of it. We have to have projects in master plans in order to go for grants typically, or it's a lot easier to apply for grants if we've identified it in a council adopted master plan. So, I think, what I would suggest is that this committee would probably just, be involved at every step of that process and make recommendations on what you'd like to see as that plan is developed. It's an iterative process. It'll get presented in public to the city council multiple times, I'm assuming. And, yeah, I think, as far as forming it now, it might be a good idea to form it now. There's probably some work to do before we ever start that process. The committee might start by getting a copy of our current multimodal plan and really reading it in depth. And then, as a group coming up with the committee recommendations on, the key high level things that you'd like to see in the updated. So I don't think it's premature to form that committee. I hope I've answered the question there.
You've done a nice job. Thank you. Yes, I think you're right that there are things that committee could do to make walking and biking a whole lot more integral to this plan. So at this time, I'll entertain a motion to form the Multimodal Transportation Master Plan Subcommittee, comprised of members. Well, we probably, the way this is phrased, it would be good to start by identifying who would like to be on this subcommittee.
Molly had a comment or a question. So there's the Transportation Master Plan Subcommittee, and then there's the Intersection Design Subcommittee. So I guess my question, and it might be more of a Brandon thing, but where is the whole Boyer Highway 2 gonna fall into that? It's gonna be a part of both of those, right? Or is this intersection thing more talking about curb radiuses and simple intersection design? And is the master plan talking about bigger picture of what Boyer Highway 2 and more major things like that are gonna look
Yes, the latter. Yeah, yeah. So,
like? Okay,
this is just my engineering opinion, but the design details about the curb radiuses and what intersections are supposed to look like and what's the standard really belong in an engineering standards manual. And I have that on my list to do that along with standard details as well. I don't believe that they belong in a master plan. You could probably include some stuff in a master plan about like guidance, like, I kind of think of it as an analogy of the comp plan versus the code, right? So the comp plan will say, we want to focus on encouraging smaller radiuses wherever practical, not, we're going to put in the multimodal master plan that every radius has to be 15 feet, full stop, no exception.
I guess, so design, intersection design is those very fine details of exactly what curb ramp's gonna look like. Whereas intersection design in the master plan is you're gonna have a light here, or you're gonna have a roundabout here, or you're gonna have a peanut here.
Mhm.
Okay, that's what I wanted to know. Thank you.
And Deb, at the previous meeting, there are people who are very concerned about Boyer and Highway 2, and how often most of us who use it frequently have come very close to being hit, either on foot or bike. And there's also how do we deal with the design of other intersections? If we were out in front of Cedar Street, that would help inform that one. So that's the kind of thing that this committee will be doing. And as Brandon said, that's more code than the master plan. So yeah. And
I just wanted
the
to-
master plan will completely redesign Boyer and Highway 2, but whether whether there's a pedestrian lead or blah, blah, blah. That's the kind of thing that this other subcommittee would look at or recommend.
So Molly, I'm a little confused. There's 4 subcommittees. And for that reason, probably most of us are going to need to serve on more than one.
Right.
I'm a almost been hit at Boyer and Highway 2 several times person. So I thought I would be interested in the intersection subcommittee. And I was thinking of events for the other one, but maybe it sounds like master plan would be a better one for me. Is that a good pair of
Correct.
things?
That's correct.
All right. Yeah, maybe Molly, and asking us about, maybe, I don't know, maybe we need separate motions for each plan. I don't know. I mean, for each subcommittee, but we might all want to think about which pair of them each of us would want to be on as we're putting this together.
Okay. Kate, I think
So-
that's a great idea.
Can I just interject? I did get some feedback from the clerk before this meeting, and this is totally up to the committee. But she did say that, we could form all these committees without, naming the members all in one fell swoop through one motion during today's meeting, if you so choose. Alternatively, you could form each one individually without naming people if you need a little bit more time.
Yeah, I guess I wasn't here last month, so I'm not sure how much of a discussion this was, but I'd like a little bit of time to understand like what the purpose of each subcommittee does before I join one. So I don't want to prolong it though, if it was just something that I had missed.
Mhm.
Just my 2 cents.
So I guess my comment would be that you can write me down for the multimodal master plan transportation, because I've dealt with that master plan and I probably know it in relatively deep detail. So I feel like what I know could be helpful there, even though I don't have a vote or anything, but,
It was your fault.
no, if you go back and listen to the YouTube meetings, you'll hear me up there fighting and talking about how much I hated this. And the reason I voted for the multimodal is because of the division. Because if you look at what they did with division, that really, really needed to happen and in a broad master plan, you're not gonna get everything that you want. But no, quite honestly, I thought it was the dumbest thing ever to have to turn 3 times right to get from South Sandpoint to the north side of Boyer to go to the grocery store for the entire, anybody who lives in South Sandpoint. So, yeah, I went round and round with the people there, so I have lots of opinions on this, so I'm more than happy to share them with the powers.
Well, what if we review what each committee would be tasked with and then have a motion to create these committees, and then maybe we even send out an email and ask people to sign up for the committees they want to be on. Does that make sense logistically to everybody?
That'd be great.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Molly, once we sign up for a committee, then what happens?
Well-
How do we know who's on which committee or who is going to call a meeting of that subcommittee? How does that work?
I think that the members we should all get a list of who signed up for each committee. And the only restriction is that it can't have a majority of our overreaching committee, so that it's never can have a quorum. And then maybe the goal is for them to, try to meet in January.
I'm just wondering how this worked before. Did someone on each subcommittee take responsibility for polling the others and calling a meeting? Do we have a model here we can work with?
We
Far
have,
looser.
well, what does the Arts Commission do? They've got a lot of subcommittees, arts and historic preservation. I would think one person would call a first meeting and the subcommittee would elect a chair and agree on a general meeting time and what they want to be discussing. And because it's a subcommittee, it doesn't have the same agenda constraints that we do. So I think they can move right along and come up with their recommendations to us piecemeal or as a whole, whatever.
So Heather, or maybe Melissa, on our subcommittees, can we just get together and talk about what we might want to do on our committee or what we're concerned about without publishing an agenda or making any kind of public notice?
I believe that's the whole point of the subcommittee, is that you don't have to follow open meeting laws. And then it's not an official act. So
Mhm.
you can come back to the official open meeting that we're in right now. And the subcommittee can make a recommendation to the committee and so on and so forth.
Okay, thanks.
Mhm.
And I feel like some of these committees are gonna meet when the need arises. And hopefully that will kind of funnel down from staff. I think it would be a good idea to just form all the committees. Make sure we kind of have a definition of, you know, what event planning is. And I think we probably know what development review is. That would have to kind of do with subdivisions and different things. And then intersection design, it sounds like we kind of already talked about the more deeper detailed things with curb radiuses and ramps and how we want to work that. And then the transportation master plan is going to be a bigger animal, which I could see once that starts rolling, meeting regularly. My question would be is, do we need to really form a subcommittee specific to Cedar Street? Not that we don't need the committee, but do we need to call it the Cedar Street Subcommittee? Because as we design a different street, do we then get rid of that one and then form a new one with that street name is just,
Deb, I followed the program and we've formed that one.
okay,
I would say it's done its job.
right,
And
okay.
yeah, it may be that Holly and Brandon want to meet again with the members of that committee, but otherwise it's probably done its job. But yeah, you're right. There may be ad hoc committees as we go along for specific projects. That would make a lot of sense. But right now, the event planning committee is because our ordinance says we will do an event every year. We'll either do it or we'll participate. And so this committee would come up with a recommendation of what they think would be the most effective, the most fun, the most whatever. They get to decide and rally us and the community behind whatever that is. And then I think the Development Review Committee initially would be working with staff on what gets reviewed and how we go about it. And then maybe be able to meet quickly to look something over and not slow a process down. I don't know. Brandon, have you thoughts on that, or committee members, anybody?
Yeah, I just also realized that I made a mistake in this agenda and the word multimodal, if anybody else noticed that, I copied it over several times, so.
Right.
The only one that's gonna have the word multimodal in it is that item number 3. Everything else is just event planning subcommittee development.
It's more
Sorry about
sweet,
that.
Brandon.
I'm an engineer, not an English major, so.
You're doing great.
Change each one.
So the Development Review Subcommittee.
I
um,
have a question about, well, okay, let me backtrack. I have two questions. I feel like at one, it may have been last meeting, someone talked about a limit of subcommittees being allowed. Did I just make that up?
I think 4 people per subcommittee, because if you go past that, then you have quorum and we can't do quorum. So I
So
think
we
it's
have a-
people, it's not committees. I think we
Unlimited
could have
potential.
800 million, but
Okay.
that's probably not gonna happen. so,
Yeah, yeah.
Um,
And then my follow-up question to that, because at first I was like, oh, are we like maxing ourselves out or what are we doing here? Because I don't understand necessarily how like planning and coding and the differentiations work, do we need to have a development review committee and an intersection design committee, or can those both be combined?
so development review would have to do with, all kinds of things around subdivisions, like, we have written some of that stuff into our code with like bike racks and where they can go and where they can't be, and kind of different types of sidewalk things, whereas the intersection thing would work specifically with intersections, like if we were, designing more of the curb ramp oriented things. And I think you're correct in that maybe those committees kind of flow together at some point if, but I see how they can be separate. Does that make sense? How those are two different
Yeah.
things, like the development review would be all new stuff, whereas an intersection thing might be something that's already pre-existing that we're redoing. Like, for instance, maybe that would have come into play with Pine Street and Highway 2, where everything was just recently redone.
Okay. My thought was just if we keep from like snowballing too many committees, then we will prevent clutter on the, how many committees do I need to volunteer for? Oh no, now we've made another temporary one and now we're. Yeah,
It may be that the intersection one will work pretty hard for a while to come up with recommendations for Highway 2 and Boyer, for all signalized intersections, for curb radii, lane width, I mean, whatever. And then kind of go pretty dormant. And if all those things are adopted, and then it may not have a lot of work, but developments will keep popping up. So I can see some subcommittees that will put a lot of effort in and then maybe not really, exist, but not really meet or be needed very often.
Especially like the multimodal. Once that's updated, let's say that gets rolling next year or the year after that, then you go through that whole process, and then that committee's gonna kind of probably sit mostly dormant until the next 5-year process, but maybe just previous to that, they'll start being like, well, we didn't get this right, or we need to, up the ante on that, or something like that, so.
Yeah.
I
And
had a
then,
question.
I was just
Go
gonna
ahead.
say while I'm babbling, I try to be brief. The event planning subcommittee, I think, could also integrate with, police and, what's been known as a bike rodeo, and maybe even work with the bike club to, potentially broaden something that's sort of semi already in existence and just, add to, that piece. So there is some of that out there already, and so I think we should be aware of that and not recreate a wheel necessarily.
Sure.
And it may or may not be a separate thing, but there are some things out there, so we should definitely.
And hopefully that's one of the first things that committee would do, is look at all kinds of events, walk and bike to school day, bike to school day, blah, 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 everything existing, and see what bike rodeos, see what should be built on, or if there's something really missing. And encourage community partnerships so that we expand the support for the kinds of things that we advocate for. So that committee probably will do some work up front, and then it may have several months a year when it does almost nothing between events. I don't know. Yeah.
And jumping around here with the committee topics, but on that intersection design committee, I'm still trying to wrap my head around like what it would entail. Is it just coming up with standards that the city should adopt for specific intersection or general across the city, a new standard for every intersection? Or is it kind of assessing existing intersections in the city and really reviewing those and what you could do to that intersection to make it more pedestrian friendly? Or is it a bit of both?
Bit of both, I'd say.
Yeah, okay.
Because if we adopt standards and then we go back and rehab intersections, hopefully, but we're gonna have a lot of guidance from Brandon on what engineering standards exist out there.
All right. Okay, it's helpful.
Is that correct, Brandon? You okay with that?
Okay. And are there any more questions or comments or concerns about any of these committees? Anything
On
else?
the development review committee, talked about this a little bit last meeting on what the timing for that looks like. I know there's some discussion around if it happens prior to anything being posted publicly. Is it possible for this committee to review things in those early meetings that occur with developers?
Yeah, we're into new business with that kind of thing for development review checklists for staff and knowing how we integrate.
Okay, that's in there.
But that would probably be something that subcommittee would really tackle with staff too.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
All right.
So, yeah. So,
Are we ready to form them?
okay. Anything else?
Just logistically, could I make a suggestion that perhaps we send out our top 2, 3, or 4 committees, rank them in case we max out and everybody wants to sign up for one. We need a couple people on another. Just throwing that out there as a suggestion.
You bring choice.
Well,
Just remember, you're always recorded.
maybe-
It's just a suggestion. Well, I think all those other pieces, don't necessitate us deciding whether we're just gonna approve of all these committees or not. I mean, the working parts of the committees are gonna come along with inside the committees. So if everybody's in agreement with developing these committees, we can start there and then we can figure out how to populate them. Or people can say, I want to be on this one, and maybe that's by way of email or at our next meeting, or.
Sure, or maybe we ask everybody for their first 3 choices in order. And if everybody's number 1 is the same, then some of those folks will have to move elsewhere. But maybe Kate and I can work with individuals to make sure that no committee has more than 4 members, and hopefully all will have at least 3 and a sense of what to do. But it's time consuming to get something on the agenda. So I think Deb's and Brandon's suggestion that we approve forming the 4 committees is a really excellent one. And then we'll follow up on getting them populated. I don't think we need an agenda item to do that once we've got a committee established.
Somebody say so moved.
Okay.
Say so moved.
So moved.
There you
Well-
go. She said so moved. Get a second?
I got a second.
Second.
There you go. You guys are rolling.
So we have a motion and a second to form the 4 subcommittees. Is there any more? Is there any more discussion? All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Anybody
Check out
opposed?
6 items. that are on there.
Yeah, you thought you were moving slow, but
And just like that.
All right. The 4 subcommittees have been established. One of our first accomplishments. Well,
Just to clarify, those emails are going to who?
excuse me?
The emails on preferences are going to go to who? The clerk or the,
it would be easier for staff if you were able to, work out how you want to form those subcommittees offline and then get them to me, and then I can get them on the agenda as you see fit.
I'm just trying to, I'm not sure, are we able to send individual emails with our choices in it to the chair or sub-chair without
Right.
issues?
Yeah, that's not gonna cause really, it's not a, you're not voting on anything that affects the city, really. You're just saying who's gonna be on which committee.
So we
I
don't
don't
need
think
to
there's a legal issue with that. So you could all email whoever volunteers to, make the list. So I don't know if
But-
Kate wants to do that or.
We don't know each other's emails.
To that
How-
yet?
How can we contact one another? Or how can everyone contact Molly and me?
So you have everybody's.
Right,
email,
I have
but-
everybody's email. I can send out a mass email with containing said information with the blind CC to members. With the information within the actual text of the email. And then that way we're not replying to all. But you guys can grab the information from what you need from the contents of that email. So after this meeting, I will work on getting that sent out to all committee members.
That's a contact list, so I don't think
Yeah,
there's a legal
it's
issue
not a
with that.
communication log.
As long as it's BCC and nobody can
Right,
email
right.
each other back and forth, it doesn't
Right.
violate any of the
But
meeting laws.
I agree with you.
Okay, Heather,
Don't need a list.
why don't you work on it? It seems like not everybody's here, and it would be nice to have a little description of what each committee is going to do. So I'm really happy to work on that with you. And
Okay.
and then yeah, good. Well, these should be really interesting. We'll all learn a lot and feel like we've accomplished a lot, I think, from this.
And just to be clear, we did pass 5 subcommittees because we did finalize our forming of the
Yeah.
Cedar Street. So I just wanted for the record.
Cedar Street was its own standalone thing that was formalized. And then we had a report and a discussion that should show up in the minutes. And then we formed the next 4 committees with some discussion of what they were going to do, and agreed that we would be signing up without staff having to spend a lot of time on it, and not letting any subcommittee have more than 4 members. Okay. So moving on to new business, a discussion of how private development and city projects will be brought to the committee and or subcommittees for review and comments. Brandon, I'm going to guess that you've got some thoughts on this.
I'm sorry, I wasn't paying attention.
I was distracting him.
What item are we on?
7.
Oh, okay. Yeah, so to follow up on what Rita was talking about before. I'm gonna be 100% honest with all of you. Gonna sugarcoat things. I am never going to advocate that this committee gets to see stuff before the public. As far as like things that people submit for a building permit or for site. I don't think it's appropriate. And my understanding of the legality of it is that we can't, it's not a public record until they paid their fees and we started the review. So I wouldn't, I don't think it would be appropriate to like, for example, if I have a pre-application meeting with an applicant, which you've been a part of, right? I'm not gonna hear, because I know this is a committee, but you're still members of the public, and I'm not gonna like share all that information until it's publicized. So I guess that's my main input on that. However, we are starting to be a lot more transparent with our new website, and both building permits and subdivisions and developments like that are under review, are being posted to the planning website. And so I would suggest that, if you want each individual project, if you want to, submit official bike ped committee comments, project, you could do that through this meeting. But I don't really know what else. I also would hesitate just for staff time. I don't want to be in the position where I have to bring every single one, make a presentation.
M- Molly, is that,
Okay.
I'm sorry?
I was just gonna say something, but you go ahead.
Oh, it seems like that could be something that the Development Review Subcommittee could do. It could keep an eye on what's being permitted by the city, and as soon as something comes up as soon as whatever portal opens that public comment is appropriate, that subcommittee could look at that plan and present something to the overall bike ped committee that the bike ped committee could then have as its official comment on that plan. My only concern would be the timeline, because it would have to get on the bike ped committee agenda. The subcommittee would have to review it, then it would have to get on the agenda for the whole committee to review. And I know that review permitting timelines are a frustration for developers in the city, and I don't have a good sense of how long that would take. Does what I'm saying make any kind of sense to you, Reed, as far as submitting plans and getting feedback on them?
Yeah, no, I'm here on like the timing of it all. And what's the minimum timing to publicly notice subdivision projects? Is it 90 days?
Yeah, I mean, there's an appeal period. It's kind of, you publicly notice, and then there's a certain amount of time, and it depends on the action that you're doing.
Receive feedback from the public.
I would say it's very rare that any sort of permit, other than maybe a single family house, but anything like a large multifamily commercial development, a new subdivision, or anything beyond like just splitting a lot in two or moving a lot line or something. Anything bigger than that, it's very rare that the review is going to be done in the cycle of 1 or 2 months. So in other words, there will at least be time for you to look at it and have a public discussion about it at least one bike ped committee meeting. And I also would say that I think the most appropriate would be, like, the way to use that would be like if that subcommittee reviews a development, and then they formulate a set of like questions or concerns, and then we have a group discussion about it. And you can ask me like, why are we doing this? I'm more than willing to have that back and forth during the public meeting, if that makes sense. And then you're also, welcome to like somehow document a official recommendation for the bike ped committee.
So my comment there would be is that there, in a lot of cases with smaller things, the subcommittee may review it and not see any orange flags or red flags. And then the other piece of that would be, as we get rolling and have a better understanding of what our ordinance say and what our code is, that we'll get a lot better at knowing what we can and cannot have an opinion on, and that will, I think, make Brandon's life a lot easier. So would it be easier if the subcommittee had questions, if they had, 1, 2, 3, and they sent it as a group email to you and you could discuss with them before they even bother with bike ped? Because there
Yeah.
might be a lot of things that I know for me, I was very ignorant when I started the process, and I was like, why can't we do this way? Why don't we do that? Because I thought they were good ideas. And, I got instructed on why this is a federal regulation, or why this is not ADA compliant, or why this is that. And I was like, okay, now I understand. So, it might expedite the process to ask Brandon questions, as long as we don't overload him too much. Very concise and simple, that he could email and the quick answers back. And that will, in the process, educate us for the future. So,
I'm more than willing to do that, and I think that's a great idea. And I will be completely honest, if I'm getting overloaded with time, I will
Mhm.
let you know. But I mean, I do that all day, every day with members of the public. I mean, most of my time is, answering the phone and sending emails back. to
educating
people that-
people.
Yeah, the people that have questions about, what's going on over here, what are they building here?
And then the other piece of that might be, maybe that subcommittee, you could direct them to our code.
Mhm.
And some of the other stuff, and if you choose to be on that committee, that, casually, every once in a while, you read one page of really technical jargon. So you don't get too overloaded, and you educate yourself so that you're not asking Brandon questions that are already printed out there. So he can direct us more to code, and then everybody can just understand what we're doing. And then I think our comments will be based in we'll make more valid comments that could change something.
Yeah, that's good. And that brings up a good point that I want to make, which is, nearly all of the stuff that we review has to be backed up by code. So in other words, when we're looking at projects, I can't just say, well, I don't think that sidewalk's wide enough, right? They're entitled to build something as long as it conforms with code. And so that's the one thing that I spend a lot of time talking to the public about, which is they call and they say, I don't think they should be able to build this because it's too tall. Well, you don't get to just make that up. It's the code says that you can. And if you think that, the zone that says you can build to X number of foot height is incorrect, then the way to fix that is to lobby
Your
city
council,
council members to direct staff to change the code. Not to just, it's really a thing about equity. It's like, we can't just pick and choose which developments. It has to be fair. So,
Just quickly, I know I think we're running out of time, but Brandon, just to confirm, it sounded like the best way to get just information access to developments related to this agenda item is, it sounds like kind of website is the best place to get that information. And then the committee can work with, I'm sure we'll be interacting with you quite a bit to have the right basis and framework and feedback and all of that. But as far as just getting visibility, is the best format the website?
yeah,
Okay.
yes, I would agree. That's the best way to keep up on current projects.
Okay.
So
Thank you.
somewhere on the website are applications which have not yet been approved.
So our new website, I'll just walk you through it. But basically it's really easy. There's a tab at the top that says departments. And then there's a subheading called planning. And then underneath that, there's a link called current projects. And if you click on that, the planning staff has uploaded all ongoing projects, basically. So it includes projects that are under review, but also projects that have been issued permits and are under construction as well. So for example, a controversial one is the Pine Street cottages, like a block away from City Hall, right off of Pine Street there. That one's under construction, but it's still up there. You know, we've already issued the permits for them to start on the construction.
Is there a mailing list for these projects when they are uploaded? Sort of.
Like an email blast when one posts.
No, I don't think so. I'm hesitant. I can ask, but I'm hesitant to add more things to the planning. You know, to the plan.
Just get a refresh.
Check it every once in a while.
Check it weekly.
I think you just have to check in on it. Like,
And frequency of changes, would you say something happens every week, every day?
it really depends. I mean, sometimes I'll get multiple permits a day. Sometimes it'll be a couple weeks before we have some stuff. So it's never.
And sometimes that's sort of time of year dependent too.
Sure.
Because it's in concrete and things that developers want to get done, you might get like a big flush and then nothing for a little while just because of where the building season is.
I'd say you don't have to check it more than once a week. I mean, that's probably the most frequently you need to. Just pick a day. Hey, every Monday morning, I'm gonna go jump on this website.
And then code, can you tell them to get the code that they like want to look at there, the sidewalk and stuff?
Yeah, absolutely.
And they won't ask you more questions. do you?
So I actually have a link. It should be.
Code is also on the website.
What's that?
The code is also on the website.
Yeah, it is. I was just having him get to tell
Yeah,
them. where-
if you're on the website, if you click on our city, under the city clerk, there's the city code. And it'll take you right to it. And you can also search within the city code. It's pretty easy to do it online. I just figured I'm in all the time, so I know how to get right to it. Might as well just let you know.
Well, I have like.
Yeah.
That's an exciting thing.
Yeah, it's really important. That code stuff's important. And also just so everybody knows, we will be probably in the process of revising a lot of our code in 2025. Following after the comp plan.
So there could be a lot of input from this committee on what kind of code changes you want to see. And some of them might not be federal standard legal to do, but we'll toss it out there. And always talk about,
This is the time, yeah. I mean,
this is the time to
start
really
thinking
start
about
looking at that, so.
So the Development Review Committee might actually wind up recommending to our committee some code amendments having to do with walking and biking.
As with your intersection design, that would be code changes potentially.
Right. Yep.
So probably a good thing to familiarize yourself with a lot of code.
And let me just add while we're talking about it, when you go into that code, write down this number 7-3-10. And that is the sidewalk code that tells you when you're required to build sidewalk and when you're not required to build sidewalk. And that is a perennial source of stress for me because it might seem easy, but you also have people on the other side of it who are just trying to build an EDU for their grandma to live in, and the code requires that they build 30 grand worth of sidewalk in order to build an apartment for their neighbor. So for pedestrian, I mean, I just focus on that section there. That would be a good place to start. And if you have any suggestions, I think the public and myself are interested to know what this community wants out of it.
That's like the spin cycle in the washing machine, constantly in a state of change, just so you know. So no code is written in stone, and they can always change. And there's been multiple variations on the whys, the whos, the why nots. So
fact, I just changed it to that section 6 months ago.
Yeah. I just voted on it. Okay.
Okay, do we have more to say about how private development and city projects will be brought to the committee? I'm not sure we have a resolution, but we do have a subcommittee that can take this up.
So question would be for Brandon. So the capital projects are not necessarily like some private things are different. Like you can't
Yes.
bring those to us before they're public, but in the process of contemplating capital projects, committees can have access to. How does that all work? It depends, I suppose it depends on the capital project or just.
Seems like
Okay, so go ahead, Molly.
it'll save a lot of time if we're in early and not asking for big changes after you've spent hours and hours and hours, right?
Yeah, I mean, well, capital projects really start, like I said, with the master plans. So it would be good to get input before, as we're developing master plans. The other thing that I see this committee being very helpful on is making recommendations on which projects to prioritize. So in other words, we'll have a master plan with a bunch of projects in it. A huge list of projects, like which one does the community want to see? Because one of the things that we struggle with as staff is that we're trying to follow the code and not let our personal opinions get involved at every step. At least Holly and I talk about that all the time. And deciding which capital projects to pursue grants for and get in the works, they take years to actually come to fruition. And it would be nice to get some community input before we take it to city council to make the decision on our priorities. Hopefully that makes sense.
Brandon,
But-
can you put that, I mean, if there are specific or individual questions between, 4 or 5 projects, can you put that on the agenda for us at any point? If there are questions from staff to us that you specifically want us to look into, or can you suggest them to the appropriate subcommittee?
Yes, I'll keep that in mind as we're going through that process. It doesn't happen constantly. But again, it's more of a every 5-year thing. So 5 years ago, I wasn't involved in it, but my understanding is staff, the public works director, city engineer, and all the other planning staff got down together and said, okay, these are the ones we want to do in the next 5 years, next 10 years, next 20 years. We update that kind of an informal plan every few years. So we're right near that point as well. We haven't done it yet. So it won't be a constant.
But maybe that's a yearly thing for Bike Ped to look at, to just, say, yeah, our priorities are still the same here, or maybe we need to slow that one a little and push the other one forward as long as there's not been significant capital spent on designing and different things like that. Or, because sometimes we put them out there and the grants don't come, so you can switch gears to another project as long as there's not been significant money put into one.
And that might be a good task for the multimodal master plan subcommittee, because that committee technically should be most familiar with the projects that are.
Okay, we'll count on that subcommittee to let us know when we need to spring into action. Okay, the next item is the PBAC review checklist for new developments that the Pedestrian Bicycle Advisory Committee used to use. And it may be that the development subcommittee wants to go over that with staff. I think staff has always tried to accomplish those things, and what we found was that additional pairs of eyes caught things and improved them often. And that in talking with developers, because they always were invited, they or their representatives were invited to the meetings, that they often bought in and became more bike and walk friendly than they had started. You have that. Is there anything else anybody wants to talk about that?
It seems to me, Molly, like that could be a point of departure and maybe arrival as well for the development review subcommittee.
Yeah.
Just seems like a useful resource for that particular group.
Yes. Good. Anybody else have thoughts? Okay. So for the next item, we'll discuss possible committee recommendations for notification policies and procedures for pedestrian and bicycle related open houses and other public events scheduled by the city. And I know Erin's got some thoughts on this. Anybody else?
I was just saying the last one, the Cedar Street one, I don't think anybody really knew about it. I didn't see it on the city Facebook or anywhere. I only got an email from Holly is the only way I knew about it. So
At our last meeting, I recalled virtually brainstorming some ideas. Is this the appropriate time to do that, Molly?
You betcha. Throw them out. That's a great idea.
So I did not hear anything about it either. For me, having it on the Sandpoint online calendar is really helpful. I know a lot of people listen to the radio. I'm not one of them, but if we could have something on the radio, that would be cool. I'm sure there's
Well,
others.
press release, a wide press release.
Yeah, if we could get something in the Bee or the Reader, that would be cool.
Sure. A press release would go to all of those media.
Agree with that, and, I, as a single council member, I can't speak for all the rest of the council, but I think this is where we've kind of faltered a little bit. I mean, we sort of try, but we're not consistent in getting it onto, the city Facebook or city news, mostly because there's been some short staffing and there's just not enough manpower for those things to always happen. So I'm not dissing staff in any way. I just know that it's more about not having enough bodies to do the job. So as a council person, even setting aside some budget money to make sure that we are press releasing or paying to have these types of open houses promoted so that we don't get 10 people to show up that and then we have as a council member, then we have a record to say, these were posted everywhere. The press release was sent out. And then I have something to stand on to say, we tried. You've got to pay a little bit of attention, you've got to have some skin in the game to pay attention to show up for these things. There's only, I can't come knock on your door, drag you out, take you. So, which sometimes it feels like needs to happen. Just as a point of, I've sat through many, many budget meetings over the years and we've not had a single member of the public in them. And we passed budget, so that's why I did.
How
And Brandon knows,
are
full of staff.
And my story always that I find hilarious is the comp plan was had a public meeting every month for like 2 years, maybe twice a month for 2 years of the P and Z committee meeting, and I went to tons of them, and it was only staff and the P and Z members were the only people in the room for 99% of them. And then the week before it was about to be passed, everyone's like, you can't just shove this down our throats. I didn't know about this.
But that could be because we didn't do an
Could be.
effective job of advertising it the way we should. So
Are there
again,
requirements for that?
only for public notices when you're going to build and you see those signs, and those actually
Sure.
have to go in that big page in the newspaper with all the little law things that nobody ever reads anyway. So, but that's where they are, in case you
Yeah.
do like to read that in your spare time. So I think we can do better. Let's just say that. So I won't
Is-
belinger that.
Is there a way we can write, and I'm not sure who we is who write press releases. In fact, I heard that the mayor's office is the only one wants press releases going out from the city at this point. But could we write them in such a way that people know what the issues are being discussed and what the conflict, the consequences might be for them? Like for your
I'll
budget
talk to the
meetings.
mayor.
Yeah,
I'll do that. I'll talk to the mayor about that piece. I'll take it on.
because if you say in this budget meeting, we're going to be talking about how much money we're going to be putting into fixing potholes, folks might show up.
Well, I'm not talking about budget as much as I'm talking about this meeting and the planning specific pieces and how to get people to these open houses. So I'll talk to him about that. Budget's another animal, but I do hear you,
Yeah.
Kay. I do hear.
Okay. So essentially, we're just giving feedback to you for this item, new business number 9, right?
The city also has some email lists. Is there
Yeah, that would be cool.
any way to
Sign up for
incorporate
notification, too.
an open house, a public exposure of something into one of or more of these email lists, so that if you're signed up for city council meetings, you get any open house one too? Or, you know, if you're signed up for P and Z or blah, blah, blah. I mean, our committee, yeah, you know, we're probably the only ones signed up for that. So, but,
It appears we have Aaron's hand has been risen. Aaron, do you want to mention something?
oh, good.
Yeah, I was just told when I asked why it wasn't posted on Facebook that it required the mayor's approval, and maybe that one was pushed out fast and they couldn't get a hold of him. I'm not sure, but it seems like there could be a blanket thing that any open house could be posted on, whatever the press releases, the Facebook, so that they don't have to go to him each time to ask him.
And then my other comment would be about the piece of emails, Molly. We did have the click it, fix it. That was something we have to pay for. I think we moved away from that piece. So I don't know if there's a way to sign up for those automatic email things. Because yeah, we would have to have some sort of mechanism to do that. And I think it worked for a while and then it didn't work, and I'd have to get back to you on specifics of that, but,
Is there
we
anyone?
can't put undue stress on the employees to have a list that they have to, you know, maintain and send all these things to people. That's gonna be a full-time job for somebody. So unless there's some sort of app or something, so, yeah, so that's a little bit more complicated, but,
Well, let's say I get notice of city council meetings, and let's say that one of those emails said, this email list will now include notice of public hearings unless you click here and get yourself off that add-on. You know, a delete option rather than a add-on.
right, it's still, I can talk to the mayor again about that, but that's still employee-based time, because somebody's gotta do those emails. I don't know that we have an automatic system that manages that sort of stuff, so,
Okay,
yeah,
Hey, quick-
I will need to inquire, because I know that the click fix it thing used to be a way you could get notifications, but from what I understand, that's gone, so I'll inquire.
It appears Evan has a comment also.
Yeah, is somebody is somebody aware of like what is the process today? Is it like on the website? Is there a calendar? Is it a mix match? Is there a consistent process that's followed just when an open house is coming up today?
Okay, so we're talking specifically about open houses now, right?
Yeah.
Right.
Because you gotta realize, like, the open houses aren't the only thing that we're doing. I mean, there's a million different things that people want notifications of. So
Right.
with open houses specifically, we do not have a defined set of policy as of now. And that's kind of what we're asking for is, I think with this agenda item is if the committee wants to make recommendations to staff and the mayor about what, ideas that you'd like to see to get more public involvement. I don't think anybody's gonna be against that. I don't believe there's a set policy, but I will say, like, right now, if we have an open house, it doesn't happen that often. I mean, we don't hold 20 public houses a year, open houses a year. I mean, it's a couple a year at the most. But when we do them, we typically send a request to have it post on Facebook. We add it to the news page on the city website. I do believe we typically send out a press release, although I don't believe that this one specifically had one because of the short timeline. Yeah, so we basically just think of any way we can get the news out and we just do it and move on. So if this committee, it might be helpful for this committee to help out, with ideas for how that policy is set in stone.
Because all committees ultimately would use that kind of thing depending on the level of open house. And that might be a policy that, I don't know that would have to rise to the level of council because it's only policy, it's not code. But again, that's something I can talk to the mayor about because it might be helpful for staff too, if they had a policy. I mean, they're intelligent enough to know, but if something kind of had a list and reminded you, because when you're thinking about doing it, you might forget one piece. You may be like, oh darn, I forgot to notify that one. I got these 5, but I forgot that 6th one. So I don't know if that's of any help to Brandon, but.
Yeah, it is. And I want to add 2 things. One is if you go to our website again, under our city. Oh, let's see, I'm sorry, not our city. Go to the main website, the tab at the top called Get Involved. There's a link called Subscribe. And if you go to that, there's one thing that says News and Announcements and that allows you to sign up for the email list. And I believe that's what Molly's talking.
Okay, so that's different from the click and fix that we got.
It's different than See Click Fix.
Okay, yeah.
So just so everybody knows what Deb's talking about is we used to have an online portal. That's how you submitted complaints and comments. We went away with that. So now it goes directly to the clerk's office. The second thing, I just want to point out that the Facebook is not because the mayor wants to be in control. It's I think all organizations probably deal with this, but the Facebook is a really difficult thing to keep under control, as you might imagine. Like, if you don't have it go through one person, it can turn into inappropriate posts. And then if you leave the comments open, the comments get really vitriolic. And so that's the reason why we have such a strict Facebook policy is because we want to be careful about what we're posting on this. So.
Is it
right.
fair to say that the open houses are exclusively related to development, if I understand correctly? And if no, not necessarily.
They're exclusively for city projects are exclusively about city capital projects, what we call capital projects. So that's rebuilding a city street with grants or tax money.
Sewer plant.
Redoing the sewer plant.
Transportation.
Yeah, if we're updating plan, we might do an open house. We did one for the comp plan at the end. We did several for Traverse Park. I mean, like a dozen of them probably.
I have to interrupt. I apologize,
Sorry.
but we have ran out of time. So I do believe this is something we can probably continue over, obviously, if chosen. But we do need to wrap up the meeting due to time constraints.
Sandpoint.
And then maybe Deb will have.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, guys, give me a minute to do. Yeah.
Well,
What if our friend
Since
who
we have
said,
run out of
yeah,
time,
take some iron pot of fire, just put different ones in. Okay, thank you guys. Hopefully it was chatty, hopefully more informative than painful for you guys. All right, have a great
See
day.
ya.
Okay, go ahead, Molly.
since we've run out of time, this meeting is now adjourned at 1 p.m. I'm on Mountain Time here. And things that we didn't get to will be talked about at our next meeting. Thank
Okay,
you
thank you,
all.
Molly.
you.
Okay, bye-bye.